No way.
What's it like being here on Election Day? So today is November 5th, 2024. We're here in New York City. What is it like as someone who, I'm assuming you can't vote?
Can't vote yet.
But
Not yet.
Not yet. But yeah, what is that like? Seeing just the craziness of American politics.
First off, I think I genuinely appreciate the pride that Americans have for recognizing how important democracy is, and that there's a lot of pride in going to vote and so on. I think that is generally good. Not saying that's not happening in other countries necessarily, but I do think there's a certain, you get the sticker and whatnot, and someone was telling me today that they brought the whole family out, and then they brought the kids to vote and showed them how it's done.
Bring the kids to vote?
Wow.
No, not
the swing states, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Here in New York, that's
if you trust everything on Twitter, you'll be like, yeah, it's gonna be, it's gonna be.
Yeah,
We've heard about this.
His dead
Kids,
grandma.
illegal immigrants, everyone
His
votes
dead
here
grandma
apparently.
voted yesterday.
Yeah,
in North
But,
Carolina.
North Carolina.
But yeah, and I've I totally appreciate that, right? Other than that,
Yeah.
of course, it's a fairly divided country right now. Let's be effing honest. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like every, we were looking at through my X feed. It's every other thing is either election, poll, Trump, Kamala, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's taking over right now. But it is a lot of fun. We're gonna go back to the hotel tonight, and I don't know what we're gonna get for food yet. We got to figure that out. But we are just gonna watch election coverage for 7 hours. Yeah, you know Red Zone for football. You've seen that?
I've heard about it, but
the Octobox, you got 8 games on at once.
Okay.
That's what we're gonna do.
Sensory overload
but with
for football.
Fox News, CNN,
Sensory overload
MSNBC,
for
we're gonna
the
have
election
all of
coverage.
it.
there must be a bar in New York where you can do that. I cannot imagine there's not a bar in New York where you can walk in and you're going to have essentially those 8 screens happening tonight with that. There must be.
We're going to do that in our hotel room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
I wanted to say, too, I was sent Public's X post about the election, right? And I saw it, and it was vote for, your pick, or place your bet.
Place your bet.
For
who's going to win the election.
I was like, oh, this is like a Polymarket thing or a Robinhood thing. So this is a really interesting thing. I click on the link, and it goes right to voting for the actual, or registering to vote for the candidate. How did y'all think of that? Was that a marketing team decision, or how did that come up?
Yeah, it was just we once in a while we always do these little marketing stunts and whatnot whenever something comes up, and obviously election betting, or call it certain futures contracts trading of that obviously has gone bonkers in the last few weeks between Kalshi and then obviously Robinhood launched their version of it, and generally speaking. We always try to also ensure that we're a company where people understand that we're on the side of proper investing. And so, placing a bet on who's going to win the election in the same place where you'll have your retirement account, is maybe, a little questionable to some regards.
Yeah.
Not saying we won't ever go into futures trading, but and so we're just as Robinhood launched it too and whatnot, we just put that out as a little marketing stunt to essentially be election betting done right, and when you click on the website, it just drives you to finding your polling station, so to say.
Well, because some of the language on y'all's website is voting or investing for serious investors, or a platform for serious investors, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of where that stems from?
Yeah, exactly. I think when you look at specifically consumer fintech, and I'm guiding it a little bit, but if you look specifically at consumer fintech and that first generation, I think there has been a lot of kind of gamified finance, which means your roundup, your payday loan that has some twist to it, and in investing that has been really heavily kind of like gamified trading, right? So the easiest way to do options trading or CFD trading in Europe and things like that. And I feel like that has been very much that first generation of consumer fintech, as also it's just especially in the US. And I think what came out of that is that that place where you build a serious portfolio for yourself, and a little bit that platform for that next generation hasn't really happened yet, and that's obviously what we are building and continues to build, is to really kind of build that platform that can be that Schwab for the next generation, for lack of a better wording.
Yeah. How does that work? Like the philosophy behind what you're doing at Public, where you say, there is a more, noble way to invest your money or something like that. Is that how you would describe it as the philosophy, that we're going to be for the serious investor? We're not here to basically have a sports book?
Exactly like that. I'm gonna stop here. Yeah, essentially. I mean, again, if you look at the incumbents, you have serious investing platforms. They're just a little bit clunky and outdated. And they're often built to funnel you into talking to a financial advisor. And there's a little bit the sense of that either we want to funnel you to talk to a financial advisor and to basically clip 1 or 2% of your portfolio every year for managing it for you entirely. Or on the other end, if you don't want to do that, please do a bunch of options trading, because that's where we make the most money on if you're self-directed. And that has been a little bit the camp in the old world. And then, again, in those generations, people start somewhere on the fringes. And I think the first generation of, investing/trading apps in the US of these, newer of that newer cohort has started on the side of more speculation, more active trading. And then where we really always came was like, we actually think that the best model kind of sits in the middle between the completely managed and someone does it for yourself and passive, and the really active trading every day. And we also think that this generation, called like the millennials and co, they've been kind of growing up with way more financial literacy earlier in their lives, which gives them way more confidence on their own investing strategies and ideas that they have. And so they are a little bit self-directed first. Not saying that they will not have parts of the portfolio managed at some point, or they also go super active, on something they find fun or so on. It's all good. But generally speaking, they are more self-directed first. And so hence we saw this opening in the middle, where it's a sense of build a platform where you can build your proper portfolio. You have all asset classes in one hand, but you're still driving your own strategies.
Yeah. Leif, you don't run Public by yourself. You have a co-CEO, Yannick. And, Josiah and I run Demo Day together, and we're really, really early on in our company's journey. Public's way further along than we are. How have you and Yannick worked together to be co-CEOs and lead this company well?
So Yannick and I know each other for quite some time. We had a mentor together, a guy called Henrik Wördelin, who's Danish, started BarkBox. If you have a dog, you might know. There's like a subscription box for dog toys and treats and stuff. And so on. And he had this incubator in New York called Prehype, and that's essentially where I met Yannick. Was literally like an old shitty office in Chinatown where you had to like walk in. The descriptions were like, if you feel like you're walking to a sweatshop, you're on the right track. And then when you go into the elevator, you had like literally like an old Chinese man sitting in the elevator all day, because it was like one of these old elevators where you have to like pull that, kind of like, and then the thing goes up, Anyway, so that was like the incubator, aka a bunch of people building stuff in a box somewhere in some sweatshop back in Chinatown, and but anyway, so that's where we met. Yannick had a company, I had a company. We both sold our companies at similar times, and that's when we kind of came together to do Public together. And so first off, there was some trust and respect and so on before we started it. It was not that we like met at some startup event and then we're like, we should sell a company together, let's go tomorrow. That obviously helps. And then the way the company is structured is that we have our own direct reports. And so high level strategy is something we decide on together. High level roadmap we decide together on, that I talk like really high level. And then essentially day-to-day product design Yannick runs, day-to-day growth, so to say, I run. And then there's like ancillary kind of teams that, I also just run like finance and operations and whatnot, but we have a, I would say quite awesome senior team that obviously can run that fairly autonomously there as well. But that's roughly how it's kind of divided. And I think that helps a lot, that the responsibility is just really clear. And so that in the day-to-day, there's very quick decision-making, because it's not that like every single decision in the company has to be decided between the two of us, right. But it's really more of the like really high-level strategic decisions. And I think what we've seen is that being two people, you have some better balanced decision-making, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and it helps a lot to have someone who experiences everything the exact same way that you do, with the exact same incentives as well, and the exact same goals that they have, because, we have the same ownership, we have the same, view into the company, so to say. We share an office together every day, right? And I think that is like the baseline for that. But then also, it just extends into the sense of that. We're all human beings. We will all have a bad day at some point, and we might make emotional decisions. But by having someone that can counter that, I think you balance decisions better, because if one of us is super stressed today and like maybe makes a call a little bit from the hip, then there's someone there to also just like check that a little bit. Right. And for that counterparty to check that is someone who experiences everything the same way that you do, has the same incentives that you do, has the same goals that you have in some regard. And I think that is really good and healthy for the important decisions that have to be made in the company.
Kind of reminds me of consuls in Rome, where you'd have two consuls to rule all of Rome together, and they'd work together in that way. So what specific problem did you and Yannick see in the world back before public was ever even, it was just an idea? What specific problem did you see that you said, we're going to create a solution for that, and that became public?
So first, we saw that most people did not start investing until they're like mid-30s in most cases. And it was heavily driven by people who were just starting when they had some life event. They maybe got a child, they maybe inherited some money. And those were like the kind of catalyst events for people to actually start to like do that. And then maybe they had some, too much savings saved up, or they didn't know what to do with yet, and so what to do with now. And a big reason of that at the time was we looked at the median average savings of a millennial in the country, and it was like $2,500 or something at the time. But also at the time, like Amazon or Google stock price was like $2,000. And so you pretty quickly realized that if you wanted to actually build a portfolio, it was kind of hard, because the way you would build it is to essentially dollar cost average yourself into a portfolio with every paycheck that comes in. Right? You wouldn't necessarily start off with like, I have $50,000 right now I need to deploy, let's go. But you would, build your portfolio over time with every paycheck that comes into the door. And that was really hard. And so the first kind of problem that we, so to say, solved with the platform was that we were the first to do fractional investing in the stocks. And basically breaking that down and making it possible to just buy any stock with any amount of money. But it also just helped people in terms of portfolio allocation. And like, I think we all think of dollar amounts when we would allocate our portfolio. Like if you would call some broker right now in the old days, you wouldn't tell them, buy me 4 shares of XYZ. You would be like, put $2,000 into blah. And because we'll think in dollar amounts, obviously, we don't think necessarily in shares all the time.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit the kind of first, move that we did. And then from there, we essentially fractionalized every other asset class, right? We recently launched fractional stocks. Obviously, crypto is fractional by design already, which is another reason also why this generation kind of expects this experience, And I think when now someone signs up for public and they just type in a dollar amount to buy something, they wouldn't think twice about it. They would just be like, this is just how this works, right?
Yeah.
And so on. And so that was like the first thing to really solve. But essentially, it was really about helping people to build a portfolio earlier in their lives, to break that barrier down, and then from there do that, again from more of a long-term mind to really build something that you kind of compound over time, and that comes again from this mindset of like that you actually likely build it up in your early days, or like earlier in your life from your paychecks, and that just continuously kind of goes over time.
Yeah. What piece of advice would you give someone like myself and Josiah as we grow and lead a company together, as we're friends before we became founders together, but what piece of advice would you give someone like myself and Josiah?
In regard to what?
Like for leading a company, like you do with your friend Yannick, who's before y'all were founders together, y'all were friends in some capacity.
In regard to like keeping our friendship at the same time as being able to work well together.
Super honest. If I just dive on the friendship piece again. I would argue that it's always better to be business partners first than to be friends first, because at the end of the day, you should be super aligned on the business, and there's always also the emotional side of being friends, of course. And you kind of need to put that by side as such. I would say that Yannick and I became better friends over time by being business partners. But we started, like, we were acquaintances. We weren't like best buds when we started public together, right? So, and I think that, in my experience, I think, generally speaking, like works better.
Did you ever have a big disagreement with Yannick at any point that almost meant you guys took different directions, and one of you maybe left public? And if you did have a time like that, could you tell the story of how you rekindled?
We have disagreements all the time, of course, and we will hash those out, but never that bad in a sense. And I think it comes back to always be incredibly honest on everything and be able to just speak your truth at all times. And with that, also just from a notion of like never taking anything personal, and just, you know, if you discuss the issue very clearly, like we have moments where like we're literally like shouting at each other with swear words, for example, you know, about a certain thing, and then 30 seconds later, as heated as that argument was, we might talk completely calmly about some other thing.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think it's just having this like very clear distance of like we're just hashing something out right now, and in most cases also this general respect of like understanding that the other person likely has a point that you're not seeing, that they're arguing from. They were just not necessarily yet able to articulate it in a way that you understand their point, and vice versa. Yeah. And so you're right now just basically trying to find that misalignment. But once you find that misalignment of like, oh, that's where you're coming from, that's why you think that. Now I get it. Now I understand this point. But also maybe I have this other point that now and like, and then you kind of get to the agreement. And so generally speaking, I think we never really had any disagreement where we didn't agree in the end. Because at the end of the day, we have the same business goals, you know, and
that sounds like it takes a lot of humility to be able to say anytime this person's making a point, and obviously it comes from experience of knowing he's smart, he's made a lot of great calls in the past, but being able to take that step to say, I'm going to try to see it from your point of view and understand that you are saying something of value here, something of an effect. I just can't see it. I'm going to try to get there. I think the humility required to do that is actually pretty rare in people. Would you say that is pretty critical to being a great founder, is having the humility to be able to listen to other people's, you know, ideas enough to be able to know when you're saying no to that idea, at least you fully understand what they're trying to argue?
100,000%. 100%. But I think I'd argue it's easier as a founder than as an employee. Because as a founder, you're always getting back to wanting for your baby to be successful. And that is what you truly in the end care about. And because you're at the top of the food chain, at least in your organization, you know, any like political things of like what my next promotion is and like how did I look in this meeting and blah, 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 doesn't really matter to you. So I think it's actually way easier as a founder than as an employee. Yeah. And as an employee, I think it's that in most organizations, and you want to try to root that out as much as possible, but everyone's just human at the end. In most organizations, people will still have this like in them of like, how did I look? How was I perceived? And that's, I think, why in a lot of organizations you have a little bit the sense of it's tough for people to admit they were wrong, or, you know, and so on, because a lot of people in most organizations still very much care about how they're perceived by others, especially their boss or the CEO of the company or whatever. And that sucks because it's in the way of good work in most cases. And therefore, you want to try to root that out as much as possible. But I think most people will still kind of, you know, think about that a lot. Yeah.
I kind of want to shift over to, I've just been thinking about it. I don't know how you feel about Robinhood, but I would assume that Robinhood is pretty much a direct competitor to public. And I mean, is that something that you guys do you see them that way? Like, do you see them as the competition and you want to beat them every single day? Or is it more like, they're just an adjacent company that does similar things to us, but we're doing our own thing?
I think it's more the latter, because I think we are more competing with the Schwab and Fidelity of this world.
Okay.
Also, if we would steal AUM from somewhere, we likely would steal it more from there.
Got it.
And I would argue, Robinhood has built a really good product. They have. Obviously, we have opinions on how we conduct business and, just a sense of how quickly you might want to funnel someone into an options trade and things like that. But generally speaking, I think what is good about having something like Robinhood in the market for us is that, they are, I think, one of the competitors where we look at and it kind of keeps us on our toes in terms of product quality. Versus the incumbents is like the complete opposite. Like you open, when we launched bonds and we look at the competition and like what bond trading and investing looks like on the incumbents, like you press a button and you look like you're being sucked through a time machine to 1996, and it's like a table with serif fonts and like drop downs where 3 things don't work, and like it's crazy,
Yeah.
And so I would argue that, obviously I would love to have no competition.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that if you have talented competitors, I think what it does, it creates some pressure for product velocity. It,
Absolutely.
Creates pressure for raising the bar internally as well, and so on. And I think if you have bad competition, or easy competition, it can maybe also, make your org lazy. Because they make you really successful, obviously, because you can beat them very easy. But yeah, so that's how I would look at it. Like definitely more adjacent. Of course we're stealing users from them here, or they might steal from us here and whatnot. That always happens. But I would say they're on a certain track now, and it's definitely slightly different from the track that we are on.
Got it.
Public's seen a ton of growth over the last several years. Tons of customers, tons of money being put in and taken out of the platform. How do you deal with the pressure of being able to handle that much money on your app, as well as all these customers flocking to Public every single day?
Our CTO often has the nickname of Chief Security Officer, which sounds funny, but it's obviously a good thing. There's obviously a little bit this principle of like, move fast and don't break things. Because when you deal with people's money, you have to be twice as cautious. Also, we're in a regulated space. And so like when we have downtime, there's scenarios where we're liable for losses and stuff like that. And so like we cannot be down. Like over the last 12 months, we had 30 minutes of cumulative downtime.
Wow.
Like, which is
that's amazing.
Like nothing, comparably speaking.
Yeah.
And that stuff is just super important, obviously, when you deal with people's money.
Yeah.
And so like, it creates a ton of pressure, no question. But on the other hand, also, knowing how much downtime the incumbents have, especially recently, it's also something that I think you can use to your advantage. Like whenever Fidelity is down, we have a great day. So
yeah. So it sounds like millennials and Gen Z are probably more likely to go to be towards a public.com. They'd say, oh, this is kind of right up my alley. How are you reaching the older generations who are just, they've been using Fidelity or Schwab for the last 40 years, some of them maybe. How do you reach out to those people and turn them into public.com users?
The honest reality is we don't do that much. Like, obviously it happens through just general things that you do and products that you launch, campaigns that you run and whatnot. Like, it just organically happens, of course, as well.
Yeah.
But we're not actively going after them. What we're going actively after is like the top 25% of millennials.
Okay.
That's like the core of our user base, right? And you can be like, plus Gen Z who was over 18, and maybe, plus Gen Xers who are, younger than 50, or, that you can try to narrow it down even more and whatnot. But generally speaking, it's like the top 25% of millennials. That's our like core target demographic. And so even internally, we always talk about if we spend money to acquire a customer, we want to target those dollars as perfectly as possible to that type of audience.
What's been your most successful ad campaign targeted towards that millennial group?
a good and healthy product.
Like what y'all did with the Dumb Money movie. You know, you did a $25
Yeah.
ticket in, and you know you can get some money towards your public.com
And
account.
we try to do like creative campaigns things all the time. Back to the election betting, little Twitter stunt and stuff like that.
Did those work?
But I wouldn't look at that stuff necessarily always as like great user acquisition drivers, like in terms of like direct response. How I think about it more is as you build a company, you want to find moments where you can prove your values. Not just talk about them, but we can prove them in action. And that can be how you execute on your product. Like we've done things like safety labels, which we invented. Now some other people are doing it too, but like where we basically, if a stock is very volatile, it's an invoice ETF, sometimes more risky, we have like little safety labels that tell you about those risks, When we went off payment for order flow on the regular equities trading side, like that was, for example, one of the moves where like you prove your values, right? You prove what you're standing for and the actions that you take as a company. But that can also come across in certain campaigns that you run, for example. Like the whole thing of us being more for serious investors, and so like betting on the election, the same place we have your retirement account, maybe not a good idea from a brand perspective, or even at least and hence we did this little stunt, which is just underlying again what our values as a company are. And so I think as you build your company, to just always look for these opportunities to show off these values, because when we think about retention of a customer, there's the utilitarian retention of that's a retention that comes from it being a good product, it does what it says it would do, it might be cheap or all these things, but these are things that are also easy to compete with, right? There can always be someone who makes it freer than free or cheaper than you do it. There's always like you build a cool feature that is unique to you for a year, and then suddenly everyone has it. So you will always kind of sprint after the next thing on your differentiation and like what the retention that is driven from the utility that you provide. Now on the other end, you have emotional retention, and emotional retention comes from people essentially having an emotional connection to you as a company, and they are with you and they're sticking with you because of that connection. And that connection is mostly built actually through things that hit the heart more than the brain. And those are driven by values. And those are driven by, I really think this company is awesome. Like they do things the right way. And, and that can be driven by features as well. Like you could argue that us going off payment for order flow is maybe also a feature in regard that someone could copy, of course. But but there are these things that kind of push the values and therefore this value alignment with your customers. And so someone does not just pick you for the utility you provide, but they also pick you and stick with you for that alignment that they feel with that company. And that is something that's obviously hard to measure and whatnot, but that emotional retention is something you want to have an eye on, because that is incredibly hard to compete with. Right? Some competitor can always build the same features that we build or try to copy them or whatever. It's really hard for them to replicate the emotional connection someone feels with our company. Really, really, really hard. Right? And that's, I think, what, where some of these marketing things that underline these values, help as well.
And I imagine that would definitely increase word of mouth, just sharing about, hey, I love this app, you got to download it. And
100%. Because what happens essentially is that, let's say we meet in a bar right now, right? We're hanging out, you pull out, the other green app, and my reaction then as a user of Public shouldn't just be, I use Public, it's a little cleaner and whatnot. It's like, my reaction should be like, whoa.
You get combative,
like, what the fuck? Like, you should use Public. Like, put this back in your pocket. Like, delete this app right now. Give me, like, I'm going to give you this code. You're going to transfer your account over to Public. Here's why. Dung, 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 dung. And those bullet points, right? Those are in most cases not just features, but they're points of like value alignment, right? And you essentially, whenever you find something as you build the company where you can create these value alignment pieces and prove that to your users, they become arguments that you arm your customers with that makes them even like that gives them the ability to rally on your behalf, right? You're essentially giving them these like rallying points so they can go to other people and be like, this is awesome because of bum, bum, bum. Some of them might still be features, of course, but generally speaking, the like value alignment things are also the ones that make people emotional about it, right? Like my reaction of like, whoa, what the fuck? Like put this back in your pocket, like that would only come if I have some sort of like emotional reaction to this. It would not come because I think the watch list management feature in public is better than the other companies. Like it won't. Like
what's a company that's doing this right now that you use and you would say you're inspired by the way that like you would go out and you would tell anybody you got to download this app or you got to try on these shoes or whatever it is? Is there a company that you think does this really well for you that you get inspired by to say let's try to implement this in public?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm sure there's a lot of things in like just like consumer goods that try to do this, but I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff on like healthy eating and whatnot that would do that.
Like same with Beehive and Substack. People are so passionate about one or the other. It's like, why would you use X when you could use this? And I use this because, or I'm the same way with Google Maps. Yeah, I hate Apple Maps. So
I love Apple Maps.
Yeah,
and I try to get everyone to get on Apple Maps.
Google Maps, it's not even close. It's so much better. Because the exact same reaction is kind of what you want.
Yeah,
right?
I do think, and it's the most cliche example, I'm really, really sorry, but Apple does a really good job at this.
Yeah.
And they do a good job at this, especially when you, for example, look at how they push privacy. Privacy as a value that they build into all their products, right? Or how they are building all the health features now in.
Well, all those ad campaigns that are so privacy focused.
Exactly. And so like they are, and obviously also feature driven, but you feel a little bit of ethos of the company in this stuff, and you can totally see how, by extension of that, you will trust your data more in, maybe on your iPhone than you might on your Android potentially, and stuff like that. So
yeah.
But yeah.
On top of just delivering great for your customers, for your users, what is Public doing to like prove to your users that you have this ethos? Because I can feel it just sitting here in the room with you, but most of your users probably don't even know who you are, but they can feel the ethos that you're talking about, that you're animated with right now in the app. How did you accomplish that? How did you get people to be able to go out and in a bar say, you should delete that app, download Public?
Yeah. First off, I think we could do a 10 times better job at that, to be quite honest. And I think it goes into the nitty gritty of like taking people on the journey, right? Literally in your onboarding, when you sign up for Public, what are the first 3 statements when you come into the app that you see about Public as a company? Not just the features you provide of like, get, 4.6% of your cash, like great, which is, anyone can do that. So like it falls into onboarding, it falls in your top of funnel marketing, it falls very heavily into your PR, I would say. Like that's, I think, where a lot of that happens. And it just builds over time. But I can guarantee you will find a ton of Public users who might not even be that aware, because they might have just stumbled over the app, downloaded it, and skipped through the onboarding and started investing, and that's what they do now, and they like the UI of it. And then over time you kind of need to nurture these people to make sure of like, hey, by the way, have you recognized that this is how we think as a company, and it's like certain things that we've done and whatnot. But yeah, and back to that point, I think it's because it's about retention and it's about what comes with that, which is word of mouth, to your point. It's not just something that only happens in top of funnel. It's something that happens throughout the experience at all time. And so safety labels is now that little thing. I know a bunch of people copied it now, but but seeing little things in the experience where you kind of recognize like they're a little bit more transparent, where you recognize like, oh, this is kind of cool, like that they actually tell me this is risky. Like I wouldn't have expected that. I would have thought they just like pump me into whatever is the most risky because they make money on it.
It reminds me of community notes on X, like the way that safety label kind of works.
Great example. Yes. Great example.
You sort of just, everyone can feel a little bit like, okay, I'm not just being manipulated all the time. Every time I read some post, I actually can get a more objective like metric on, okay, this is true, this is bogus.
And the existence of that feature tells you about the ethos of the company, right? And so 100%.
That's really cool.
How do you feel like the next couple of years of growth will look like for Public? What are some things you want to accomplish that you'll be proud of if this ends up happening?
From a pure business perspective, profitability, that's one. We're still a money-burning company, right?
Yeah.
but we also want to be high growth, and so we're like a little bit like on purpose, still burning. We have a lot in the kicker, and this sounds again really cliche, but we have a lot that we're working on in terms of how AI plays a role in your portfolio building that I'm quite excited about. So a lot of things are going to happen there over the next year.
Because you have the product's called Alpha, correct? How does that work?
Yeah, so Alpha right now is essentially helping you as like a research assistant.
Okay.
And you can think of it as like push and pull. So on the one side, you can just swipe down on any stock and ask any question about the stock. And it's basically just a way to do really quick bite-sized research, right? Swipe down on, random example, Tesla, like how many cars has Tesla delivered last quarter? And like this just tells you, because you a chart for it and stuff like that. But then also it basically gives you these like proactive alerts of what's happening in the markets and around certain assets. So a stock is moving for some reason today, we actually give you an alert and like a little card under the stock chart that tells you of like, hey, this is likely what the stock is moving right now. And if you tap on that, you get a more detailed breakdown on that through the Alpha Assistant. If there's an earnings call, you will actually get like an earnings call recap in your inbox in the app, literally like an hour after the earnings call or something, depending on which stock it is and how it worked. But and so on. And so like it's basically giving these like more fundamental insights around the markets and the company or companies as you kind of go through the experience in some way. And so that's what Alpha is right now. And then obviously the next step for Alpha is like to help you a little bit more in like guidance and advice to some regard. And that's a little bit the next phase that's would likely happen around it.
Is there anything that like runs into that, like a problem that runs into that? Because I feel like so many people will put on X, right? This is not investment advice. But is Alpha trying to provide investment advice, or is it more just guiding you to the right decision?
Right now, no investment advice. It's all just factual data, essentially, that you can request, right? It's literally just a different way to kind of request information, but there's no advice.
Okay.
But in the future, how we think about it is that, again, the old incumbent world was essentially either you fully manage to everything yourself, or you have a financial advisor who does everything entirely for you and they make the decision on, like pretty much on your behalf.
Yeah.
And that spectrum we think is actually much wider. And in that width of that spectrum, if you're looking more in the middle, there's something we internally call like guided investing, where like you are still the initiator, you might still make the last decision, but there's some guidance along the way. And that's where we see a lot of opportunity, where it's not a study about like immediately everyone does everything for you, or that tells you of like, yes, this is right or this is wrong, but of more of a sense of guiding you through your decisions in some way. And that's, we think, where a lot of AI, or where AI can play a really great role.
For the founders watching this, is there any one book that you would recommend to read for any founder who wants to go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 100?
I like The Messy Middle from Scott Belsky.
Okay.
Because it's just very practical. It's very practical, good of little nuggets and stories in there. There's one quote in The Messy Middle that I always tell people a bunch, also again a little bit like business ethos wise, which is the end of a negotiation is the beginning of a relationship, which is just like, I love it so much from a perspective of how to conduct yourself in negotiations into kind of knowing that you're building a business relationship and like that it's not just about getting the best fucking deal possible and fucking everyone over and like while you're trying to get to that outcome, but where like a good deal is one where everyone feels like they walk away as a winner. And if you can make that happen, the way how you conduct yourself, the way you communicate, and the way how you structure the deal and stuff like that. And I think that statement puts that beautifully.
Leif, we really appreciate you coming on the show today and giving us some time to chat about Public. Thank you, man.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.